Welcome to the Daily Flow. Please welcome your host, John Coleman.
Greetings from Durhamstown Castle, County Meath in Ireland. I've got a lovely crackling stove next to me and lovely little crackles of timber burning, and it's lovely and cozy here. Thank you for joining this evening. Nik Antonelli made me aware of an expression a few years ago that I quite liked. And the expression that he used was, take the time it takes, so it takes less time. So if you can afford to do something twice, like for example, doing it wrong the first time and then fixing it the second time, maybe you can afford to do it once. I'm not saying do it right first time because we understand about complexity and not understanding everything and so on. But by and large, there's a lot of work where we could have just taken the time it takes to do the work properly the first time we tried it. In Kanban, you have policies on your definition of workflow. Typically, there would be entry criteria or exit criteria on your columns. So Kanban system members would be clear on when a work item can move from one column to the next column. The team would have essentially agreed like a definition of done to all intents and purposes for each column on their board. You don't have to do that. It's just something I like to do. You don't have to use exit criteria. You could also use entry criteria. So an item can come into this column following things have already happened. So it's a nice thing to have where you're clear in your team what done means for each column, and then you take the time it takes so that it takes less time. You do it right. You do it as best you can. We don't know how valuable it's going to be until we actually go live, and it's a good approach. There is another figure of speech which has been troubling me in the last number of places that I've worked in. I hear this expression, it takes as long as it takes. It takes as long as it takes kind of gives an indication that there really isn't a sense of urgency about finishing the work, because what's the rush? July and August are right off anyway, so that's normal. So we won't get it done until September or October. So really, a really low bar is often set when people are saying it takes as long as it takes. Cycle times typically get longer and longer when people have that approach. It takes as long as it takes. No real sense of urgency when items are aging, when they're taking longer than even 19 out of 20 items of the same type before. People can be too relaxed about it, and which means that when those items eventually finish, their cycle times will have an even worse point in the cycle time scatter plot. So our cycle times keep getting longer and longer. You don't need to be a genius to figure out when your cycle times are getting longer and longer, your throughput could eventually flatten and go down. And it's quite an expensive recovery to get back from that. To get anything done quickly in that type of environment, people tend to expedite work items. They might call it different things depending on where you are, but if your stakeholders, your customers are used to asking for something and they're used to hearing a very long time duration for when that'll be done, they find a way for that work to be done sooner. So a process, if you like, gets engineered, often known as expedite. You might have an expedite lane, or it might be even a bit more subtle than that. It could be a particular label on some work that gets through the system faster. So when you've got all these items being expedited to get through the system faster, all the work that was already in progress is now suffering as a result of the energy we're putting into the items that have been expedited. Essentially, it's like we're chasing new shiny balls. We're trying to focus on finishing the new priorities rather than focusing on the ones that we already said were priorities, but we kind of almost forgotten about why they were important, and we've become very relaxed about when they'll be done. So essentially the game that happens in that situation when people say it takes as long as it takes is one way or another, people figure out a way to get work done faster. So some work moves faster than other work. The other work gets slower and slower. Eventually, it gets to a point where even the items that are expedited aren't going through fast enough. And the other work is really suffering, perilously aging at this point, to the extent that the work might, even when you finally deliver it, it might actually be obsolete. Because life changes, business changes, people change their minds. Sometimes they don't know what they want until they see something, and we find out very late that actually we've got the wrong thing. So eventually we need some kind of super expedite process to fast track the expedites within the expedites. And that's really where it gets quite sad, really. That's one way of looking at it. If you say it takes as long as it takes, there's another way of looking at it, which is, why not just finish the work that we've just started? It was important enough to finish it. We said we were going to finish it, just finish it. And the teams that I've worked with, and I'm not unusual in this regard, I hear stories like this from other practitioners as well. Without any major heroics, cycle times tend to halve, throughput tends to double when teams are really focused and when they really try to optimize the amount of work they're getting through. So instead of a situation where cycle times are getting longer and longer, throughput is eventually going down, a lot of the work is aging in the system. Instead of that, what you've got is a situation where I won't say these cycle times are predictable, but they're more predictable by work item type. You might be able to know kind of a range of roughly, how long these items are likely to take. And eventually your cycle times will come down. That has a knock-on effect of your throughput going up, and you end up in this place where you actually have time to think. You've got rid of a lot of that opportunity cost of the former scenario where you said it takes as long as it takes, because now we can actually avail of opportunities. We're delivering faster. We're delivering more stuff. Probably we're hitting the bullseye a bit better as well, because we're delivering faster, so we're getting feedback faster, so we can adjust faster. And all sorts of good things happen when you do that. I don't understand it, but I think people almost have Stockholm syndrome around optimizing flow. They really have some kind of attachment to being overwhelmed, being overburdened, having too much work. Maybe they're scared about the devil, the devil you don't know versus the devil you know. But give it a go. Give it a go. Turn off that tap. Stop the new work coming in. Get your work in order. Get the work finished. Get some feedback on what you're doing. Then you will be actually taking the time it takes, so it takes less time. Let's be honest with ourselves. When our system is overwhelmed, when there's too much going on, when people are expediting and super expediting, what do you think is going to happen to our compliance with our own exit criteria and our Kanban columns? I suspect people will be taking shortcuts. So a lot of bad things happen as a result of an attitude. It takes as long as it takes. It's a really toxic way to think, and it causes all sorts of problems. And I actually have seen the opposite, which is where the system has been truly optimized, and we're tweaking our WIP limits, and we're figuring out how we can learn how to do each other's work, and we're doing it through the back door. We're not kind of trying to put people in a position where they're doing something they don't want to do, but people can see for themselves from the signals, because you've got very good signals off your Kanban system, because you've designed it well and you keep improving it. When we have the attitude of it takes as long as it takes, not only does the delivery performance go down, the morale goes down, and continuous improvement just goes out the window. So please, when you hear people say it takes as long as it takes, just pause and reflect and just think about what are the knock-on implications of that belief system, and think of maybe a better world where you can have time to think, doing better things, feeling more fulfilled, enjoying more what you're doing. That's it for today. Thank you.
Got a question for us? Leave a voice message at anchor.fm/dailyflow/message, and we'll feature it as well as provide you with an answer.